Andrea Berta. He's a nice bloke, dresses well. You'd expect that from an Italian, but also some fantastic news about Mr. Bukayo Saka. This is today's Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is our Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Thank you as always for tuning in, for joining me. Really appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much for listening. Those of you listening on catch-up, of course, as well. If you'd ever be so kind to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. There is going to be 0 April Fool's jokes here. I'm not a big fan. I want to be honest with you. I get fooled by them all the time. Every single time I do these. Every single time April Fool's comes around, something fools me. So I'm laying it out on the line here now. There is no April Fools going on here this morning. So yes, you can sit and chill in the knowledge that you're not going to be fooled today. This is all very real, all very real indeed. Can't wait for lunchtime to come on April Fool's Day. Good morning to you all joining us in the chat box. Really appreciate you listening. Thank you so much for doing so. Good morning to Martin and James, Granddaddy Gooner Paul. We've got Black Shine and Glenn and Zoom. We've got Morgie and Tom. We've got Carlton. We've got Simple Unity, Colin, Rob, Stephen, Roy. We've got Matt G and Jamil, Steve. We've got Carl and Shari. We've got Runs with Cows and Martin and Natty Tom. Thank you to you all. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for listening and for tuning in as well. And I'll be taking you through some of the stories from yesterday, of course, including quite a big one, a couple of big ones, in fact, and giving you a little bit of behind-the-scenes glimpse at what went down yesterday at Mikel Arteta's press conference. Arsenal did indeed announce the first part of their summer tour, and Arsenal have announced that they will be going to play Tottenham in Hong Kong at the end of July. So for those that are in the area or able to travel out there, you'll have an absolutely fantastic time, I'm sure. But it's the first North London derby, I think, outside of England, maybe? Potentially. I know it was, I think, definitely outside of Europe, but first North London derby away from Europe at least, but perhaps even outside of London. First North London derby involved in this. So any of our listeners in the Far East able to go and get there, go and get there. Should be a really entertaining situation for you all, I'm sure, to enjoy. I'm not salty in any way that I can't go. I'm not salty in any way whatsoever. Of course I'm not. But that is the first part of all. There's expectations that more information about the Arsenal will be releasing in the coming days and weeks. Yes, the story behind that picture, those of you that are on social media yesterday probably saw the pictures of Andrea Berta, who surprised us in the Arsenal press room ahead of Mikel Arteta's media conference. Came in, was introduced to everybody, shook hands with everybody, and some pictures were, I think it was streamed on the Arsenal website ahead of Arteta's press conference. I think they went live, or maybe Beanie Man Sports also went live before the press conference was indeed active. And the picture that was used was this one, of which for some reason I look like I'm falling asleep or just in awe of Andrea Berta's presence, clearly. So when I was then sent a million DMs by people saying, "Hey, Tom, is that you?" Yes, it was me. And no, I'm not asleep, is the answer to those two questions that I've been asked a million times. And yeah, it was, we weren't expecting him to be there. I'll be very honest. Like, it wasn't something we were expecting. I know I made a joke yesterday morning about, I wonder if I'll meet Andrea Berta. Like, it was a complete surprise. He was brought in to the room by kind of head of communications and media, Kate Laurens, and shook hands with everybody and had a brief chat. He was asked we were kind of asked if we'd kind of give a little bit of kind of lay of the land of the feel for how Arsenal are viewed. And James McNicholas from The Athletic and, of course, the Arscast as well kind of took the lead and gave I'd say a good kind of summary of kind of where Arsenal are at right now. I think it is an exciting period for Andrea to join Arsenal. He's got, a club that are very much back in the relevancy of title races again and aiming to win the biggest of trophies. They're already in the quarterfinals of the Champions League this season, as we know as well. And he was excited to get started and take Arsenal that next step. He talked a bit about the next step that Arsenal need to go to. And that obviously was quite encouraging also. And then Mikel Arteta, of course, came into the room as well, and we began the press conference. And it was a nice moment as they kind of crossed paths as one left and Arteta came into the room. But his English, you can tell, is obviously something that he's gradually improving at. He was speaking English like competently and fine and understood the questions. I don't know if he got some of the British humour or not yet. That will come with time. There were a couple of jokes about the weather and how different it is from Spain and stuff like that. But I think certainly this was an encouraging interaction of which he, kind of introduced himself. Did he talk? Yeah, he talked to all of us, Rancid. Yes, we went around, shook hands, said hello, couple of jokes, and it was just good to kind of like break down that barrier. Edu, of course, was very personable. Like Edu would be very chatty. Of course, when I was sitting in the mix zone or standing in the mix zone after games, he would always come up and speak to people, and Tim Lewis does as well. And it was interesting because obviously what we'd heard from kind of Spanish correspondents was that Andrea Berta is quite a private person. He doesn't really do too much talking. And of course, this was something I imagine that was kind of orchestrated for him to introduce himself to us. But how much exposure we get with Andrea in the future, of course, remains to be seen. I didn't ask him what his favourite Nando's order is, but I did kind of slyly slip him a card that just said, make sure you have the chocolate cake, just because I just carry those on me, these days. It's an important part of my my repertoire. My own Arsenal. It's full of those little calling cards to advise people, chow down on a slice of chocolate cake. Anyway, of course, as mentioned, Mikel Arteta did follow Andrea Berta in the press room to conduct a press conference, which was very, very positive indeed. Very interesting, actually. I think it was one of his best press conferences that he's done. He also stayed behind Arteta after the kind of cameras had stopped rolling and had a bit of a chat. We had a kind of an off-the-record conversation about a couple of things with some of the journalists as well. And it's kind of nice and personable and a good moment as well after to share. So, that was great. But talking about the press conference and kind of what he said, he was asked whether or not Bukayo Saka is going to be available to help with the game tomorrow evening. And he said, Bukayo is ready to go. Massive boost, massive encouragement that Bukayo Saka will indeed be in the squad. He wasn't with the youth team last night. There were some, theories that maybe we would see Bukayo Saka involved in a game yesterday evening to get him kind of transitioned into the group again. But he was pitched again in training, involved, playing, and who knows? He could even start tonight's game against Fulham. Exciting times ahead of us. I'm sure there's going to be a massive roar when indeed Bukayo's name is read out by Peter Majuzzi on the DJing. So, very much looking forward to that. He was asked about whether he could start. And he just said, he could start tomorrow, which was, again, he's very committed, like more committal than he ever really is with kind of injuries and stuff. He was asked about Calafiori and Timber, of course. Both of those are and have experienced some issues when it comes to their availability. Ricardo, unfortunately, picked up an injury again with the national team. Really unfortunate the way it happened. It could have been much worse. So hopefully it's going to be a matter of weeks. But we'll have to see how that injury evolves. And Jurian, he was ill for a long period, quite badly. He's felt much better, though, in the last few days. So Timber could start, but it could be White. Could be Ben White that's more ready to start over Jurian Timber if he's still recovering from this illness. But Arteta has said that he's felt much better in the coming days. Then came the discussion about Andrea Berta and, of course, his impact and what we are expecting from him. He says, yes, I think it's a big addition to the club, a big addition to the team, and a team that is already formed with a lot of great people. Richard Garlick leading it, obviously, but as well, James King. He said James. Now, James could refer, of course, to James King, who's currently the head of football operations at Arsenal. But you've also got James Ellis as well, who is one of the main kind of recruiters. He's head of scouting currently at Arsenal. So he could have referred to James King. He could have referred to James Ellis. He just said James. I assumed it was James King as head of football operations, but because James Ellis is quite high up in what he does at Arsenal, it could have been James Ellis as well. With Jason Ato as well, with a lot of people at the club that have been doing such good work. So it's about building out that chemistry. And I believe Josh has been fully involved in the process as well. So we are all very excited to have him. And he was asked about how much this could help Arsenal during the transfer window. And he said, well, you just met him, as we did. And straight away, the words that come out are always winning, improving, and demanding. And he's a person very honest, very straightforward, very clear vision of what he wants to do. He was so willing to join us, which is a very positive thing as well, because he has many other possibilities and he's chosen to come to us. And now it's about us giving him the support and the understanding of the situation and the context straight away, and for him to start to do what he's already done for many, many years at the highest level, which has been very impressive. And of course, we heard from David Ornstein at the start of this week that Victor Gyökeres, of course, stands out as a very clear figurehead in Andrea Berta's mind, it seems, with an interest from the Italian, and whether that not changes kind of what Arsenal's plans have been going into the current season. In terms of what I asked Arteta, of course, with Andrea Berta coming in to join the club in kind of a period where you're halfway between the start of the year and you're halfway between the summer. And so you're coming into a club at a point where we know that Arsenal do a lot of planning, ahead of time. A lot of things are decided well in advance. And then, of course, things can change. Things should change when you appoint a new sporting director. And so I asked Arteta, I said, he's coming at a time in this midway point between the start of the year and the summer, and you talk about planning ahead and having a lot of ideas about what you want, and I'm sure a lot of that has already been done. So what's that dynamic going to be like with somebody coming in with already established plans in mind, but also someone who wants to bring in their own ideas? And Arteta said, that's why I mentioned that the good thing is the strong team that we already have in place and all the work that the recruitment that Jason and James and all the boys have been doing, and everything is prepared, and that the planning has to be tweaked, because when you plan and you execute, most of the time ends up being a bit different from the direction of the vision, and what we want to do is clear. He would jump on board of that, and hopefully he would twist it and make it better, and that's why he's here, which I thought was a really encouraging bit of news that, yes, there's plans, yes, there's ideas that we've got in place, but certainly the idea of having somebody of his caliber come in, he will look at the plans, look at what we've suggested, and take that, tweak it, change it, make it better, hopefully. Of course, over the break, we did hear Thomas Tuchel speak about kind of Arsenal in indirect terms. Well, actually, I say indirect. It was quite direct, actually, what Thomas Tuchel said regarding kind of our use of players. And he was asked kind of this question about clubs wanting the national team to rest players in certain matches. And he brought up this idea of Declan Rice being used in certain games. And he says, after a 7-1 first leg and Declan Rice played the next match with Arsenal, I didn't have the feeling that they think so much about us. I don't think we have to break our heads about this. I take care about the players. We take care about the schedule, but it would be the wrong signal to tell the players how you have tough matches coming up, so I rest you now. Which I thought was obviously very interesting, because this idea that the clubs don't really think about the national team when they select players, and Tuchel bringing that up and using an Arsenal example, I thought I'd actually put that to Arteta. So I said, we heard from Thomas Tuchel over the international break, first chance to really hear from him. And one of the things he talked about and made reference to was the fact that Declan Rice played in the 7-1 win over PSV, and this idea of rotation and picking players of importance, even when perhaps there's ideas about giving players rest for their clubs as well. And it is important that this kind of that we kind of get on top of this, and they are given important rest at certain times of the season, perhaps in friendlies. How is that relationship with Thomas going to evolve, and how important is it, of course, to get on top of that idea? And I thought Arteta's response to this was actually quite interesting, where he said, yeah, well, the more communication there is and understanding, obviously, when a player plays, it means that you do want him to play, or do you have to play him? it's very different. You have other alternatives. You still have to play him. It's one decision. You have to play because there are other alternatives, because the situation you have in the squad, that's one thing. The best thing is always to communicate ahead what the intentions are and what the processes are and what the thought process was behind a certain decision, because to compare two similar actions with different contexts, it doesn't make any sense. I was surprised how much Arteta took this question and kind of went very honest with it, actually. I thought certainly my interpretation of what Arteta has said there is that Tuchel using the 7-1 argument of playing Rice in that game. Of course, Arsenal winning that game was important and making sure that they didn't lose that game in the context of kind of their momentum, if you like, with a season of games that are coming up. And of course, the players that we still did play in that game, Arsenal did make changes for their 7-1 for the 2-2 draw with PSV. The team that day in midfield was Jorginho, Zinchenko, and Rice. Rice was the only player, of course, that is a usual starter, and of course, he did come off in this game. He was substituted in this game, Declan Rice. He came off. Let me scroll and see if I can find. He came off in the 64th minute, so pretty early on in this game, Rice came off. And it was Jorginho and Zinchenko that started that match in midfield alongside him over Odegaard and Thomas Partey, who played more football actually than Declan Rice to a degree of the availability. And so when he said the best thing is to communicate ahead what the intentions are and what the processes are and what the thought process was behind a certain decision, because to compare two similar actions with different contexts, it doesn't make any sense. And that's really pointed. And also where he said, the more communication there, and understand, obviously, when a player plays, it means that do you want to play him or do you have to play him? So that's a really interesting one as well. It's this idea that in games, as I mentioned in the question, talking about friendlies, do you have to play Bukayo Saka for 90 minutes in a friendly match after he's played for months? The argument there is no, you probably don't have to play Bukayo Saka. And actually, in friendly matches, you should be given the opportunities to some players, of course, that haven't had too much opportunity to play. And of course, therefore, you get the opportunity to see some other players given the opportunity. So I was really interested how much Arteta took that question and went with it. And I'm very glad that he did, because I think it provided an important perspective and an important stance that Arsenal and Arteta particularly holds, on that situation as well. So, yeah, was very interesting indeed. He did talk also about Miles Lewis-Skelly, and he says, great moment. We're so happy for him. So unusual to see something like this on your debut, especially a fullback scoring the goal in the man at the hill for his country. So a very special week for him. The embargo section after the press conference, of course, which was embargoed until 10:30 last night, was also quite good. It contained some other really interesting points as well. He said that he confirmed that Bukayo Saka had already played a match behind closed doors as part of his recovery as well. Gary Jacob asking him that question as well, about whether or not he played a game, and indeed he had played a match. So that confirmed that rumor about behind closed door friendlies, that indeed that is what happened. So he has played a competitive match in the sense of a friendly. He's played in kind of an environment that's beyond just training. So that's obviously very positive, of course, as well. That's really good. There was some more about the summer transfer window. He was very kind of adamant about the importance of the transfer window and, making sure that Arsenal have a big summer. He talked about kind of the idea of having several big summer transfer windows as well. And we've had five big years and 5 big summers, and we've not always been able to do what we wanted to do. But this summer he was really putting emphasis. And I've been talking to you guys for a long time about how I've said that 2025 is an absolutely massive year for Arsenal in terms of the summer. And I think it's a year that's been targeted by the club for a long time. So let's wait and see if that turns out to be true. Well, let's quickly do a little preview ahead of tomorrow's game, or tonight's game, I should say, against Fulham. Okay, this is part 2 of the show, where we're going to be looking ahead to our preview of tonight's game against Fulham. As you can see from my lineup, I have indeed gone with Bukayo Saka in the starting 11. He's there because we're told he's ready. He's there because we're told that he's ready to go and that he's played a behind closed door friendly as well. And if he is ready to go, then I have to trust what we're being told. And if he's ready to go, then he's ready to play. I take the advice of the club. I take the advice of that over theories from supporters, of course. We know so much less than they know. And if we're being told that he's ready to go, then building up that match fitness ahead of a game against Real Madrid is going to be really important. I think people underestimate actually how important it is to play players from the start of games when the other team are not up to speed. If you bring a player in later on in games sometimes and they have to try and get up to speed, it can actually be more of a risky scenario for players, it turns out. And so I think that you can give them a half, at least, potentially. And there you go. And you can give Saka the opportunity. Whether or not he does start is another thing. Of course, we will wait and see what happens tonight, and whether or not Arteta decides to go with Saka from the start remains to be seen. But I think this period that we've had off, this period of 2 weeks plus, if indeed we didn't have an international break, it might have been that Saka would have been coming off the bench already by now. And he would have been coming off the bench in certain games. And in fact, he may have already built up enough fitness in these 2 weeks international break so that he can start matches. If Arteta said he's ready to go, I trust that. And so let's wait and see indeed what happens. Merino, I've gone up front. I think this is the way forwards really at the moment, because he's got 4 goals in 7 matches playing at centre forward so far for Arsenal. He's just gone away with the Spanish national side, also played for a period of time up front and scored again. Scored in our most recent match, of course, against Chelsea in that 1-0 victory. I don't like Trossard there. We've not really seen Martinelli there. We've not really seen Winery there. And the way in which Arsenal plays stylistically, we need that focal point. And the focal point that Moreno provides, he doesn't necessarily have all the attributes of a striker, of course not. But that focal point that he does possess, I think, does help the players around him for a degree. I think also he had something from set pieces and from crosses as well. And we're in such a simplified game state without Havertz and without Jesus that there is very little choice. And it's very easy to go, I'd rather see Trossard play there. Every time this season I've seen Trossard play centre forward, he's really disappointed. Marino has been better than him. There isn't really a debate this season about who has been better when playing at centre forward, Marino or Trossard. The answer is Marino. He has been better than Trossard playing at centre forward this season. So the other alternative is Martinelli, who we haven't yet seen there. I don't think I'd do it straight from the off. I feel as though if it was to happen, it would happen later on in a game when you can make some changes and perhaps have a better game state to trial it, rather than, of course, the situation we have found ourselves most familiar with so far. So that's the front line: Martinelli, Moreno, Saka, Rice, Odegaard, Partey, and then, of course, Miles Lewis, Sketty, Gabriel, Saliba, Timber. If Timber's not fully fit yet and ready, of course, White would come in. And then David Raya in goal. Let's get your predictions, your score lines, your scores on the doors into the chat, and we'll get some of your feelings about that as well. I'll just quickly tackle a question that I saw pop up a second ago. Someone asked why there's not a tour in America this year. No, there's no tour in America this year because of the Club World Cup, Eamon. So the Club World Cup is in America, and so there's no way that you'd have other clubs going out there as well to play matches, because all of the grounds and airports and training grounds and all of that will be used up by the teams that are currently playing in the Club World Cup. Oslo says 2-0 to the Arsenal. Hoodie says 2-0 Saka and Marino. Kirill says 2-1 Fulham. Goodness me. Stephen says 2-0. Agreed. Barry says 2-1 Arsenal. Runs with Cows also says 2-0. Rancy's going 2-1 Saka and Odegaard. Logan's going for a 2-0 Arsenal win as well. Temi says 4-0 Fulham. Smith Rowe hat-trick and a late freak Saliba own goal and red card. The reverse psychology as usual from Temi. Standing strong. Mohammed says 4-1 Arsenal. Garab says 1-1. Ali says I want a clean sheet, so he's going for a 0-0. Certainly there's a lot of positivity, but some people thinking maybe we won't get the result that we need. Raven says 3-0 Gunners. Fulham looked poor the other day as well. Arthur says, are you based on your predicted team on the fact that Fulham will play a low block? I mean, that's always a fact to consider. They played a low block against us in their own stadium, so to think that they wouldn't come to Arsenal and also operate in a low block, I think is a bit naive as well. So yeah, they certainly will. And I think Marino, of course, is much better against those low block sides compared to somebody like a Trossard is as well. Right, I'll keep putting up your scores on the doors as we go to part 3. Your questions and more right after this. Right, this is part 3 of today's show, where we're going to be tackling a few of your questions over the next 10 minutes or so. So start getting them into the chat box. Use your capital Q to help them stand out, and I'll do my absolute best to answer as many of them as feasibly possible. Stephen says, who is the ref in the VAR, please? It's important before we do a score prediction. But Stephen, you've already done one. Referee for Arsenal, Fulham. Let's have a quick look, shall we? Arsenal Fulham referee could be bad omens for the Gunners. Headline from One Football. I mean, you can pretty much write that about any referee that they get. The referee is John Brooks, is the referee for this game. Andy Madley will be on VAR with Konstantin Hatzidakis as the assistant VAR. Brooks, what's the bad omen? He was the referee at Brighton. The one awarding a penalty to the Gunners in the Brighton win. Did we win at Brighton? I don't think we did we? Unless it was from a previous year, maybe it was. But with Arsenal seeing their F24 FA Cup hopes and the 2025 League Cup hopes fall apart with Brooks refereeing, and with Brooks also refereeing the Man City title-winning game against West Ham last May, the omens aren't great. Basically, there's not really a history of him at Arsenal. Martin says, I don't see this Winery as a 9 idea, not in his current physical state and the way that we play. I don't want a hairy-assed centre-back kicking crap out of him. Mike says, haven't seen Michael Oliver in our matches lately. Neither have I. Daryl says, Tom, is Thierry Henry back? I mean, what, from retirement, Daryl? I mean, I think he could give us a good 20 minutes, maybe longer. Ray Beam says, why is Arteta so adverse to using Martinelli as centre forward? Probably because he's tried it and it's not really worked for Arsenal. They were for a long time trialing him kind of in training at centre forwards. It was something that when in his first few years of being at Arsenal, they did trial a lot, Martinelli playing as a centre forward, and it didn't really work. He has played 16 times at centre forward. In the Europa League, he scored twice against Stand Liège and once against Vitoria. Didn't score in any of the subsequent appearances he had at centre forward. The last time he played for Arsenal at centre forward was against Everton, where I think he kind of dovetailed with Trossard. I think he still played off the left. It says he plays as a striker here, but I remember him playing off the left-hand side, actually, and then coming off injured, I think, pretty soon after. Martinelli has played at centre forward, but it's a very limited kind of group. Premier League, he's played centre forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I don't think that Everton game he did play centre forward. I remember that game. I was there, and he played off the left. Trossard played more through the middle, and he didn't score in any of the other games. The times he did play in the League Cup in 2019, he did score twice against Forest and twice against Liverpool, but as I say, that was the League Cup games in 2019, nearly 6 years ago, believe it or not. So yeah, it's not really worked when Martinelli's played there. That's why Martinelli, whereas Merino, 4 goals in 7 games for him, and of course his role is to do a job, and he's doing a job. I don't think he's doing a great job, but I think he's doing a job, and I think that would be a fair way to describe it. Oliver says, is Arteta's choice to stick with Merino up front looking better over time with everyone else back from injury now? But I mean, potentially, yeah, because we've got kind of that figurehead used to playing in that position. I don't like it, but it is what it is. Headphone Merchant says, what happens with Jason Ato? I think he stays. Pretty sure the idea is for him to stay, continue as the assistant sporting director. The Athletic have reported that Berta isn't bringing in anybody else at the moment, and at the moment he will continue with the existing recruitment team at Arsenal. Sandra says, Tom, did you see Romano's video that Isak is Arsenal's dream target and Arteta really wants him? I mean, I've told you that, Sandra. That's pretty well documented. So, yeah, I'm not surprised that Fab's going with that line as well. Roy says, Tom, do you think the club are pivoting to a more experienced striker like Gyökeres rather than a Sesko, especially as they made a bid for Watkins in January? I think the Gyökeres isn't about pivoting toward more of an experienced centre forward. I think it's just because Berta clearly has got an appreciation for him as a centre forward over, say, perhaps Sesko. Kirill says, hey, Tom, do you think Waneri could be perfect cover for Saka as a right winger and a central midfielder behind Odegaard and, of course, for Rice? I think Waneri is going to be a great option for Arsenal moving forwards in those different positions. You know, he's still just turned 18 years of age. People are turning around and saying, you know, how can we drop Waneri all of a sudden? He's 18. He's playing more minutes than you would ever expect really to play at this kind of level. Saka's now back. Waneri will be a really good option for us in rotation and, of course, coming off the bench and get more minutes gradually and then maybe establish himself in another position on the field as well. Richard says, I swear somebody showed that Martinelli's goal and minutes as a striker is actually quite good. I imagine it's quite good because when he first joined, he scored kind of like in small bursts. As we said earlier, you got 2 against Stade Liège, 2 against Liverpool, 2 against Nottingham Forest. So in those games where he's played kind of a shorter period of time over just 3 matches, he scored 4 goals. And I think that's helped to kind of boost up the numbers of goal per minute, if you like. But broadly across more matches, he's not delivered in the majority of them. Vigetu says, does Marino up top and Kai give us a clue of the type of centre forward that will go for? I think that's pretty much the case of what we would expect anyway, isn't it? Because Isak, Gyökeres and Sesko have all got kind of taller frames. They're not slow target men. They are all very dynamic forwards, but they all do have that physical presence about them. So that clearly is something that I think Arteta values in the profile of a centre forward that he wants to choose in that centre forward position. King says, I would still have Saka come in at a second half and start Ethan in tonight's game. We will wait and see what, of course, Arteta decides to do. Major Lee says, not many people in Hong Kong support Spurs, so I'm expecting a stadium full of Reds. I mean, but there are a lot of Asian Tottenham supporters, particularly because of the influence of Heung-min Son. So I would imagine that a lot of them would make the journey to Hong Kong, to be fair. I imagine that would happen. And Sandra says, did you see Plettigal's post about Sane? I did indeed, and we talked about that. But I'd be very surprised if Leroy Sané ends up at Arsenal. I would be surprised, to be honest, if that happened. I think I have a kind of this feeling that Arsenal might be being used as something of a Arsenal might be used as a bit of an idea of getting him a better contract offer, similarly to what we saw with Joshua Kimmich recently. I'm not saying it would be, it definitely wouldn't happen. I just can't see it. I just can't see it happening. I just get that kind of vibe that Arsenal, I think, are being used in the whole contract situation there to try and get him a deal at Bayern, because if you say that a club like Arsenal are still interested, it will encourage Bayern, of course, to keep him. Signing him on a free transfer, I'd rather we went for, say, a Jonathan David, perhaps, on a free transfer than Leroy Sané. Mr. Robo says, with Berta and given his track record of signing free agents, could we finally see Arsenal going for some big free agent names and ones that have their contracts running out? I do want to be very advising on this. Don't go back through Atletico Madrid's transfer history and go, oh, he signed this guy and he signed this guy, and so we can make an assumption that he will sign this guy. He was not as involved in some transfers as he was in others. There's very little information, of course, and guidance to tell us who he had the most influence on. But I see people saying like Julian Alvarez, at Atleti this season. Look at that deal. Brilliant bit of transfer work. And talking about Julian Alvarez as being a player that now we'll see that Arsenal type of transfer. That was Diego Simeone. Diego Simeone was the driving force behind the Julian Alvarez deal, not Berta. João Felix, for instance, the Athletic, of course, reporting, of course, yesterday, talking and explaining about how Heel was more of the driving force behind that João Felix deal than perhaps Andrea Berta was, even though he's got his links to Jorge Mendes. So don't go back and kind of like meticulously read through all of the deals that have been done by Atleti and assume that those types of deals are what you're going to get from Arsenal with Berta, because the reality is there was a lot of cooks at Atletico Madrid. That was one of the reasons why he left at the end of his time with the club. A lot of cooks at Atletico. And so for that reason, I think it would be, what's the word? Not ignorant, but just a little bit naive to consider every deal that Atletico have done crediting Berta with that. So yeah, I'd advise against that kind of way of looking at it. Richard says, I'm not trusting any news until 12 o'clock today. It's very smart. Very, very smart. And he says, do you think Berta is aware of the success rate of Portuguese league imports into the Premier League? I hope he is right. I don't think that's even a thing. I really don't like when it's used as kind of, kind of a stick to beat players with it. It's not xenophobic. It's lazy, is what it is. It's just a lazy trope. It's much better to look at players on their actual merits. If you want to talk about the context of Gyökeres playing for Sporting, who are the best team in Portugal, and that naturally is going to give him a platform to be very successful, and therefore you can have doubts about whether or not he's going to be able to translate that to Arsenal in the Premier League, 100%. But to turn around and say that any player that moves from Portugal to England, there is a chance that it may not work because we have seen a number of players from the Portuguese league move to England and it's not really worked out. That's just lazy. It's just lazy. I'm not going to go as far as saying it's borderline xenophobic. I don't think it is, but it's definitely got something a bit darker attached to it that I don't like. I think it's a generalization that's really quite poor to make. So, because I've heard people talk about like the Eredivisie in this way, and yet I look at the success of Cody Gakpo or Luis Suarez. I look at the success of Jurrien Timber this season. And I'm like, this is rubbish. Like this idea that a player moving from the Eredivisie to the Premier League can't work, or the idea that a player moving from the Portuguese league to the Premier League can't work. I just don't like this idea that it can't happen, or that it won't happen, and it won't happen successfully at all. I mean, one of the best Premier League defenders of my generation, Ricardo Carvalho, for instance, joining Chelsea, came from the Portuguese league and was absolutely brilliant. I think people have this idea that Fabio Vieira, of course, joined Arsenal and didn't do that well. And now there's this kind of generalization around that. Or Darwin Núñez, of course, joining Liverpool and not doing that well. That all of a sudden it's an absolute disaster. So yeah, Ruben Diaz. I'm just going through a little bit of a list now. Ruben Diaz, brilliant. Bruno Fernandes for Man United, brilliant. Ruben Neves for Wolves, great player. Scrolling down a little bit more. Vitinha, I mean, obviously went to Wolves, did quite well, went back and now gone to PSG and is a brilliant player. Ederson is a goalkeeper. I know it's a goalkeeper, but still, Ederson done so well at Manchester City. So Evan Nilsson, it's been great for Bournemouth this season at centre forward. Bernardo Silva went to Monaco first, then of course to England, but still, it's like this. It's really lazy, this idea that players that would move from Portugal to the Premier League won't do well. I think it's really, really lazy to look at football in this way and to kind of look at it. Nemanja Matic, Benfica to Chelsea, excellent bit of business. João Moutinho in the end, after going from, did he go straight from Monaco to Wolves after Porto? Or did he go back to Portugal first? But João Moutinho, great player for Wolves, really helped establish them as a team that could, challenge for those European spots at one point as well. I could go on. I could keep scrolling down this list of players that have moved. I'd be interested to see how Nico Gonzalez, of course, does at Manchester City after his move from Porto as well. But it's just so lazy, this idea of players moving from one league to another. And Fabian says, Ronaldo did quite well. Yeah, anyone remember that Ronaldo bloke? He was all right, weren't he? He was pretty good. So, yeah, very, very funny indeed. Desi says, Gyökeres, Jonathan David, Mateus Cunha, Martinelli, Saka, Waneri, Odegaard, Wirtz, Guimaraes, Rice, Partey, Timber Lewis, Kelly, Gabriel, Calafiori, Sleeper, White, Frimpong. Frimpong? As in Jeremy Frimpong. Good luck getting Gyökeres, Cunha, Jonathan David, Wirtz, Guimaraes. Who else we got in there? Frimpong. 6 of the most expensive players, bar David, of course, that you could sign. It's never going to happen, Desi, but I like your ambition. Ian says the only thing that we can say is that it'll be different, of course, playing style wise. Players and managers are the sole responsibility for their form. Pelzer says, I've changed my mind on Gyökeres from yesterday. I feel like I at least want 35 goals and assists. That's more like it, mate. I'm glad that you've changed your mind because, as you said yesterday, like 24 goals is not enough from a player across all competitions for me to justify that type of signing. You need to be looking at 30 plus goals, let alone goals and assists, but goals. I think that's what's important. Right. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in and listening. Really appreciate your time. I'll be back with you, of course, tomorrow morning to do a breakdown of tonight's game against Fulham in the Premier League. We'll be talking about any other news, of course, that drops in the next 24 hours. Hopefully, we'll be having a little bit of a discussion about how Bukayo Saka smashed his return to the field tonight, certainly because that is what is expected to happen. But yes, have a fantastic Tuesday. It's the worst day of the week, but you've got an Arsenal game to help you through it. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.